This is the Al-Faw Peninsula, a tiny plot of land overlooking the Persian Gulf. It might be small, but it could soon become one of the most important stretches of land in the entire world. You see, it makes up the entirety of Iraq's coastline, and crucially, despite its size, it gives this country uniquely positioned access to the ultra-competitive global shipping industry. This mere 20-kilometre stretch of water is at the heart of a plan that could make Iraq one of the most valuable trading hubs in the region. Let me explain. This right here is the Suez Canal. For over 150 years, it's dominated the global supply chain. But overcapacity and the constant threat of piracy in the Red Sea has left experts in the shipping industry crying out for alternative routes. Iraq is hoping to answer those calls by creating a new path right here, which it argues would be quicker and safer than going via Suez. But before Iraq can snatch the global supply chain crown from Egypt, it first has to build the biggest infrastructure project in its history. Starting with this, the Al-Faw Grand Port. Engineers have had to build colossal structures with limited resources, but when completed, it'll be one of the biggest deep-water ports on the planet, and potentially the most game-changing construction project Iraq has ever built. Across the history of infrastructure, there are a few select examples of projects that came along just at the right time and in the right place to make history. Enter Iraq. Now, to say Iraq has a small coastline is a bit of an understatement. The country's border is over 3,600 kilometres, and just 58 of those kilometres are on the coasts. But it doesn't stop there, because to get out to the open ocean, it relies on this 20-kilometre wide window. But for the Iraqi authorities, that could be a golden invitation to enter the big league of global trade, because it gives them an opportunity to build the holy grail of international logistics, a deep-water port. This is what they're constructing. At the centre of the port are two huge container terminals. These consist of an artificial island which will act as the container yard, while around the outside a wharf is being constructed, allowing ships to dock. The first phase of construction for the wharf began in 2020. While the terminal islands were constructed from reclaimed land, the wharves themselves are built out over the water. Engineers drove 1,700 piles, each 50 metres long, into the seabed using a technique known as a cantitravel, which basically works like this. A few piles are initially driven into the seabed from the land, and a deck is constructed on top. From there, a machine uses that platform to rest on, as it drives piles in front of itself while the deck is completed behind it. It's a lot more reliable than other methods like using a boat, which can be affected by the conditions on the sea. The initial wharf was completed in 2024 and will host 5 berths, which will accommodate the first ships into this new port. Now, managing a project like the Al-Faw Grand Port isn't just about engineering, it takes some serious financial organisation too. That's where today's video sponsor Odoo's accounting app comes in. With Odoo, creating professional invoices is a breeze. You can generate an unlimited number of invoices instantly and keep tabs on payments with automated follow-ups for late payers. Recording transactions is simple thanks to AI-powered features that recognise and input supplier invoice data, reducing manual entry and errors. Their intuitive dashboards provide a real-time overview of your finances, with detailed reports and financial statements readily available, empowering you to make informed decisions swiftly. Odoo syncs with over 28,000 banks worldwide. This seamless integration ensures that your financial data is always up to date and accurate. Navigating local tax regulations can be pretty daunting, but Odoo's accounting app is tailored to meet local compliance requirements. The best part is that Odoo offers its first app free for life, including unlimited hosting and support. So streamline your financial management with Odoo and keep your business sailing smoothly. Now, before we get any further, it's worth pausing for a second to really get a sense of the scale of the vehicles and quantities we're talking about here. This is the Colombo Express. It's an example of a Neo-Panamax ship, one of the largest categories of container ship on the seas. Imagine taking the Chrysler building, laying it on its side, and then adding a propeller. That's roughly the size of one of these ships without anything in it. This, meanwhile, is a standard shipping container, known in the trade as a TEU. It's the unit that the entire modern logistics industry is based on, and it can hold anything from bananas to iPhones. A Neo-Panamax ship can carry 15,000 of these things. Laid out flat, that would cover half the Vatican. Now, here's the thing. The ports built to house these gigantic vessels not only need to be big, but also incredibly strong. To enable enormous container ships to navigate these small channels in a port, most vessels are equipped with thrusters on their front and rear. The largest container ships can carry up to 120,000 tons. The CN Tower in Toronto only weighs 117,000 tons. So the force they emit to nudge these vessels can be potentially devastating to any structure nearby. That's known in the jargon as port scour. Now, typically this is countered by lining the side of the structures like wharves with rocks, but that presented a big problem for AL4. You see, rocks are heavy, and the area around AL4 doesn't have enough quarries to meet the demand. Because of the sheer scale of the ports, importing the amount of rock needed was pretty much out of the question. So instead, they turned to an ingenious technology. What you're looking at here is a concrete mattress developed by Proserve. It's an innovative solution to port scour, but it has its roots in a long-standing industry technique: formwork. That works by creating a mould out of a material like wood or metal, which concrete is then poured into. Once the concrete is set, the formwork is removed and the structure stays standing. Now, the concrete mattress follows the same principle. It starts with a fabric container which uses ties sewn in at intervals to keep its shape. The mattress is laid in place and pumped full of concrete, which when set provides the same level of protection against scour. The technique has a number of advantages over traditional rock armour, not least of which being speed. Rock armour is time-consuming to construct and has to be completed before the deck of a wharf is built. But the concrete mattress can be installed at any point during construction, and that's important because it means the wider construction process is less reliant on milestones being reached in a particular sequence. Basically, it takes this activity off the critical path. At AL4, that was borne out by the first wharf being completed ahead of schedule in just 37 months. But the most important benefit is the enormous saving in materials. This 1.7 kilometre stretch of wharf would have needed armour over 3.5 metres deep, using up to 430,000 cubic metres of rock, enough to fill the rotunda of the US Capitol 12 times over. The concrete mattress, on the other hand, was only 20 centimetres thick in most places and used up just 26,500 cubic metres of concrete. Now, keeping the port structures intact is one thing, but keeping the water deep enough in what is a dynamic marine environment is quite another. The water immediately surrounding the AL4 Peninsula is fairly shallow. You can see from this picture how far out the layer of mud comes into the port site. The water of the port is being dredged to a depth of 17 metres, including a turning basin here, and a channel 400 metres wide and 24 kilometres long leading out to sea. That's a colossal amount of earth to be extracted. In total, 142 million cubic metres will be dredged from the site, but the marine conditions would soon see that fill back in. AL4 lies in a delta where the Shat Al Arab River meets the ocean. The daily flow of the tide pulls sediment from the Shat Al Arab across a vast area. Added to that, occasional sandstorms in the nearby desert blow fine grains of sand out to sea, which in turn gets washed back up in the same area. To stop the dredged channels from simply filling up again, a massive structure was needed. So they built one. This right here is the world's longest breakwater. At 14.5 kilometres long, it's so huge that it actually needs a secondary breakwater to protect the entrance of the port from waves. The breakwater faced the same issue as the wharves did with the lack of rock, but instead of a next-generation product, the solution was just pure numbers. Over 100,000 core lock units were put into place over 5 years at a cost of $591 million US. While it might be huge, the size of this enormous structure really emphasises the extent of the sediments washing into the site from the nearby delta. Construction on this initial phase of the project is now nearing completion, and the first ships are expected to dock AL4 later this year, but work on the project is going to continue for many more years to come. As well as facilities to accommodate shipping containers, berths are being constructed to transport large, unpackaged goods known as dry bulk. Phase 2 is going to see the creation of industrial facilities like a steel mill and oil refinery, and Phase 3 will see the nearby town of Al4 expanded with new housing, mosques and a commercial centre. It's not entirely clear when the Al4 port is going to be running at full capacity. Reports vary, and the General Company of Ports of Iraq didn't respond to our request for comment. But if true, the estimates are staggering. The port will open with 5 berths capable of handling 3.5 million shipping containers. But that's expected to more than double by the completion of the project. Now, in the global shipping trade, 7.5 million containers a year isn't that many. But when all the goods facilities are finished, Al4 is going to be able to process a massive 99 million tonnes of cargo annually, easily making it one of the biggest ports on the planet. That's half the reason Iraqi officials are hoping the port could herald a new era for the country and even change the balance of power in the region. This is the other half. The Iraq Development Road, a 2,000-kilometre, $19.9 billion motorway and railway linking Al4 to Turkey in what's been nicknamed the Dry Canal. Design work on the road only finished in September last year, and the project's not expected to complete until 2038. But still, when up and running with the ports, it could shave a massive 11 days off journey times compared to the canal. That's a tantalising prospect for shipping companies looking to avoid the Suez, a demographic that's growing in size. The volume of shipping here has been hit hard by continued piracy in the Red Sea. Last year, revenue dropped by nearly half as ships chose to sail the huge detour around the Cape of Good Hope rather than run the gauntlet through the Horn of Africa. It also goes without saying that the chaos caused by the grounding of the Ever Given made the problems of relying on a single trade route acutely clear. Egypt's loss, so the thinking goes, will be Iraq's gain. It's hard to overstate how much cash and power comes from controlling a part of the global shipping industry. Nearly 1 in 3 shipping containers goes through the Suez Canal. 2% of Egypt's entire GDP comes from operating this stretch of water. For Panama, which operates the world's other great shipping canal, that figure is over 5%. For Iraq, a country that's been devastated by decades of conflict, hosting such a vital link in the global supply chain could not only give it stability and wealth, but even transform it into a regional power broker. But before we get ahead of ourselves, it's important to keep in mind that even by its most ambitious estimates, Iraq's Dry Canal is not expected to replace the Suez entirely. Rail is faster, but is also more expensive than sea freight. It also can't compete with Suez in terms of capacity. Even in 2021, the year of the Ever Given grounding, the canal shipped a record 1.27 billion tonnes of cargo, way beyond anything Al4 is designed to accommodate. There's also the issue of security in Iraq itself. While the country's security has improved in recent years, pockets of Islamic State fighters remain active, as well as the Kurdistan Workers' Party, who've been known to attack pipelines between Iraq and Turkey. Infrastructure has always had the power to improve our lives in ways we often don't appreciate. But sometimes a well-planned and well-timed intervention has the ability to quite literally redraw the map of the world. Over the next 13 years, the tiny Al4 Peninsula will change beyond all recognition. Whether or not it can transform an entire country remains to be seen. This video was sponsored by Odoo. You can learn more about that at the link below. Don't forget that we're inspiring the next generation of builders through our investment into BrickBorrow, a fantastic LEGO subscription service. You can learn more and get started today over at brickborrow.com. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to the B1M.